Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our weekly Parsha Shiur. This week is Parshas Tisa. This week we're actually not going to be learning about the Parsha. Instead, I want to study together with you some of the insights on the Haftorah that we read this Parsha specifically. Now, of course, usually at this time of year, we are reading the four special Parshas. Parshas Shkolim, Parshas Zohar, Parshas Porah, and Parshas HaChodesh. Any Shabbos that we read one of these special Parshas, the Haftorah that's read that week is connected to that unique Parsha. There's a special Parsha, there's a special Haftorah for Parshas Shkolim, a special Haftorah for Parshas Zohar, etc. The Parsha of this week, Parshas Tisa, is usually associated, falls out together with one of those special Parshas. And so therefore the Haftorah that's printed in the Chumash for Tisa is actually often not read on Parshas Tisa. We usually read the special Haftorah for the special Parsha. But this year, because there are two others, the extra four Parshas actually begin next week. Next week, Parshas Vayakel will also be Parshas Shkolim, the first of the four new ones. And so the Haftorah this week is the Haftorah, which is just the Haftorah designated for Parshas Tisa, which is the Parsha of this week. And here in Parshas Tisa, the Haftorah, of Parshas Tisa, the Torah tells us an amazing story. The story, of course, is there to teach us a lesson, but it's presented by the Torah in Malachim Aleph and Perek Yud Ches as one of the very famous experiences where Eliyohu Hanavi faces 450 false prophets. The Torah calls them the Nevi'ei Habal, prophets of an Avodah Zorah referred to as Baal. So here is very briefly and very generally the backdrop of what's going on. The first Beis HaMikdash was built by Shlomo HaMelech approximately 450 years after the Jewish people came into Eretz Yisrael. At the time that Shlomo HaMelech built it, the Melucha, the empire, the Jewish kingdom was all united. All 12 tribes were under King Shlomo. Many, many Jews participated physically, practically in the construction of the Beis HaMikdash. Many Jews participated financially in the construction of the Beis HaMikdash. And it was built. The Beis HaMikdash was built under Shlomo HaMelech, the permanent and eternal house of Hashem. For all Jews. After Shlomo HaMelech passed and his son Rehoboam took over, there was a rebellion, there was a split that developed in the Jewish people, the details of which, how this exactly came about, are not for today, but suffice it to say that 10 tribes of the Jewish people separated themselves from the Malchus, from the Melucha, from the kingdom of the son of Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech was taken over by Rehoboam. A rebellion, a revolt was led by a king called Yerovam. They went up north together with 10 tribes of the Jewish people. This became known as the famous 10 tribes. Now, these 10 tribes were, within a very short amount of time, they were, Rahman al-Islam, lost to the Jewish people. They became known as the 10 lost tribes. This is how, at this time, in the one generation after Shlomo HaMelech, this is where the 10 tribes get separated from the rest of Klal Yisrael. Okay. At the time that they were separated, they were led by a king. That these 10 tribes were separated. They were led by a king, by a ruler called Yerovam. Yerovam was succeeded by a king called Achav. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin says there are 3 kings that have no chelek in olam haba, they have no share in the world to come, and lists among these 3 specifically Yerovam, the one who created this divide, this separation, and Achav, the one who succeeded him, and one more king, Manasseh, which is not for today's discussion. Now, Yerovam himself and Achav, who succeeded him, they were, as many kings, as all corrupt kings, they were concerned more than anything about protecting their kingdom. They were concerned more than anything about protecting their own position of power. And here, Yerovam faced a tremendous challenge. You see, because although he managed, Rahman al-Islam, to divide the Jewish people, to separate 10 tribes and establish for himself a kingdom, establish for himself a malucha, he knew that 3 times a year there was a mitzvah upon all Jews in Eretz Yisrael to be oile regel, to go up to the Beis HaMikdash, to be seen by Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash, to offer up korbanos, to offer up sacrifices, and to be there together with the rest of the Jewish people. Yerovam feared that if he allowed the Jews of his empire, if he allowed the Jews of these 10 tribes to go down to the southern part, to go down to Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash, to offer up sacrifices and to celebrate Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot together with all the Yidden in the Beis HaMikdash, he feared that if he allowed the Jews to come together and do this, then all Jews would eventually join the kingdom, the Malucha of Rehoboam, the son of Shlomo HaMelech, Malchus Beis David. They would all go back to the Beis HaMikdash. They would rejoin their brothers, and the 10 tribes would eventually go back to mainstream Yiddishkeit, and his Malucha, Yerovam's Malucha, would dissipate and disappear. He feared this more than anything else. And so he decided that he needed to prevent the Jewish people from going to the Beis HaMikdash on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, despite the fact that they were commanded to do so by Hashem. In order to do this, in order to prevent the Jews from the 10 tribes from going to the Beis HaMikdash on Yom Tov, he actually took his army. He ordered them to stand guard, to place blockages on the roads, and physically prevented the Jews from going to the Beis HaMikdash. Now, he knew that was, number one, a terrible sin, a terrible avera, and he also knew that from a strategic perspective, this was dangerous. The Jews could, in their anger at not being allowed to go to the Beis HaMikdash, the Jews could rebel against him. So what he did, was he gave the Jews an alternative, right? He didn't just block the road and prevent the Jews from going to the Beis HaMikdash. He also gave them an alternative. He gave them a different address, somewhere else they could go in the northern part of Eretz Yisrael. And there he established homes of idol worship. He erected, the Torah tells us, he erected 2 golden calves within his kingdom, and he encouraged the Jews, instead of going to the Beis HaMikdash to serve Hashem and to bring korbanos over there, instead, here you have these centers of Avodah Zarah, of spiritual worship. He put 2 golden calves, told the Jews, you cannot go down to the south to the Beis HaMikdash, but here is another option in the north. You can go here and serve Avodah Zarah and find an outlet for that spiritual craving. If you crave worship, if you crave to be connected to a higher source, if you crave to worship something, here, said Yerovam, there's a place you can go within the kingdom of the 10 tribes and serve Avodah Zarah. And so, exactly one generation after the construction of the first Beis HaMikdash, the Jewish nation is split, 10 tribes to the north, 2 tribes to the south, and Rahman al-Islam, idol worship and Avodah Zarah, is reintroduced into the northern part of Eretz Yisrael. Okay. The one who succeeded Yerovam was Achav. And here Achav takes this to the next level. Again, the Mishnah says that these kings were such Rishoim, they were such spiritually depraved people that they have no chelek in Olam Haba, no share in the world to come. Achav took this to the next level and really began to force the Jewish people within his kingdom to worship avodas, to worship idols. To the extent that his infamous wife, Izebel, in English called Jezebel, His infamous wife Izebel actually began a massacre of the prophets of Hashem. Any prophet, any individual that promoted the service of Hashem was in danger. Any Navi, anyone who was a prophet and communicated actually the word of Hashem in the northern part of Eretz Yisrael, Izebel and her men and their in her kingdom would hunt these Nevi'im down and kill them. In the end, only 100 prophets remained in the kingdom of the 10 tribes. Even these 100 prophets were hidden in caves by a man named Eliyohu, who supported them and managed to keep them alive. And the only public prophet who somehow managed to continue to roam the land and somehow managed to escape the murderous intentions of Achav and Izebel was Eliyohu Hanavi. Eliyohu Hanavi was the only one, and even Eliyohu Hanavi, Hashem sent him into hiding. It's a whole story. Okay. In the end, Eliyohu Hanavi decrees that there be famine in the land of Eretz Yisrael. The Jewish people are suffering. The nation of Achav is suffering. There's a terrible drought. And in the midst of all of this, the Torah tells us in the Haftorah of Parsha Tisa that Eliyahu Hanavi challenges the Jewish people in front of 450 prophets of Baal that were supported by Izebel herself. He gathers all the Jewish people together and he stages a confrontation, a challenge on a mountain called Har HaKarmel, Mount Carmel, again in the northern part of Eretz Yisrael. And Eliyahu Hanavi, in the presence of all the Jews, tells them, look, guys, we're going to settle this once and for all. You're going to have to decide who is true and who is real. Im Hashem hu Elokim, is God the true God, or are you worshippers of Baal? Are you worshippers of Avodah Zarah? Now, you all know the story, and we'll just say it over briefly. It's articulated in this week's Haftorah. 2 bulls are selected. 2 oxen are selected. One is given to the prophets of Avodah Zarah. The other one is taken by Eliyahu Hanavi. Each of them erect a mizbeach. Each of the prophets of the Avodah Zarah erect a mizbeach. Eliyahu Hanavi erects a mizbeach. They place their bulls, they place their animals on the mizbeach, and each tries to get a fire to come down from heaven to consume the bull that is placed on their mizbeach. The prophets of Baal go first. The Torah says that they place the bull on this altar and they cry out to their gods all day until evening time. Baal Aneinu, they say, please, Baal, answer us, answer us. Ve'ein koil, ve'ein oina, there is no sound, there is no response, nothing happens. Then Eliyahu Hanavi takes his bull, puts it on his shechtsit, puts it on his mizbeach, davens to Hashem, says, Hashem, please show it. He said, Eliyahu Hanavi says, Aneini Hashem, Aneini. Answer me, Hashem, answer me. There's a reason why he says it twice. We'll get into that soon. He says, please answer me, Hashem, answer me. And eventually a fire comes down from heaven and consumes the bull that has been placed on the mizbeach of Eliyahu Hanavi. The story concludes that all the Jewish people fall on their faces and they say, Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim. And with that, Eliyahu Hanavi inspires and motivates all the Jewish people to do teshuvah. All right. This is the story. Now, there are some unbelievable, amazing midrashim on the story. For example, number 1, the Medrash says, what were the Nevi'ei Habal, the prophets of idol worship? What were they thinking? What were they planning? What were they intending? In other words, they knew that there was nothing to their idols. They knew that they were bowing down to emptiness and nothingness. So why did they agree to go up against Eliyahu Hanavi? In other words, what was there? Why did they accept this challenge? If they knew that there was nothing to it, all right, maybe the people Maybe the people believed that there was something to it, but they knew that there was nothing to it. So why did they agree to this challenge in the first place? The Medrash says very famously that they had a plan. They had a secret plan. They had an exit strategy, or more than an exit strategy. They had a success strategy. What they did was, the Medrash says, when they built their Mizbeach, when the Nevi'ei Habal, the prophets of idol worship, when they built their Mizbeach, there was a cavity, there was a hiding place inside their Mizbeach. And there, inside this cavity, inside this hole, they hid an individual. They hid somebody. And they gave him the tools inside this hole in their Mizbeach. They gave him the tools necessary to light a fire. And they gave him a sign. They said, when we get to a specific part of the ceremony and we cry out and we scream and we say X, Y, Z, right? I don't think the prophet had matches. I don't think he had matches, but he probably had stones or something like that. They said, you'll strike the stones and a fire will ignite, and then it will be apparent out of nowhere that a fire consumed the sacrifice on the Mizbeach of idol worship. So they planted this individual there and they told him at the right time, light the fire. The commentaries say even more. The commentaries say that Eliyohu Hanavi was even aware of this. Eliyohu Hanavi knew that they had hid somebody inside. And so when they were crying out to their Avodah Zorah and saying, please answer us, and Eliyahu, and nothing was happening, Eliyohu Hanavi, the Torah says, was antagonizing them. He was teasing them. He was like, come on, he told them, scream a little louder, right? Maybe your God is asleep. Maybe he can't hear you. Maybe he's too far away, etc. So the commentaries say part of the antagonism of Eliyahu Hanavi was he was at least beremez, at least with a hint. He was telling him, come on, maybe the guy that you hid inside the Mizbeach, inside your altar, maybe he fell asleep. Shout louder, wake him up, let him light the fire. What actually happened in reality was that Hashem arranged that a snake came and bit this individual, and he died there while he was hidden inside their altar, and so he couldn't light the fire, and this is why nothing happened. Another Medrash relates that when it came time for the false prophets to take their ox, to take their bull and sacrifice it and put it on their altar, the ox and the bull refused to budge. It refused to go. In fact, the Medrash says, this bull said to Eliyahu Hanavi that it didn't want to go. And Eliyahu Hanavi said, you should go. There will be a Kiddush Hashem through you. Hashem's name will be sanctified through you. And the bull said to Eliyahu Hanavi, why should I go with them? Right? There were two bulls. One went, in fact, a girdle was made. A lottery was made to choose which bull would go where. So the bull that was selected to go for Avodah Zorah says to Eliyahu Hanavi, the other bull is going to go make a Kiddush Hashem. Why should I go and be sacrificed on an altar that will make Hashem angry? And Eliyahu Hanavi reassured it. Eliyahu Hanavi said, don't worry, just like Hashem's name will be sanctified through the other bull, so will be sanctified through your bull. And Eliyahu Hanavi and the bull said, I'm not going to go unless you, Eliyahu Hanavi, give me to them. And so Eliyahu Hanavi has to actually give the bull to these false prophets in order for them to be able to put it on their altar. All right. Also, the Medrash says, Eliyahu Hanavi shouts out to Hashem and says, Aneni, Hashem, Aneni, answer me, Hashem, answer me. Why did he say it twice? The Medrash says, Eliyahu Hanavi said to Hashem, answer me, make a fire come down from heaven. And then he said, and Hashem, answer me, make this experience successful so that the Jews should not say that the fire came down from heaven out of kishuf, out of sorcery or black magic. He wanted not just the fire to come down from heaven, but he wanted the Jews to see and to believe and to feel and to know in their gut that this was something that had come directly from Hashem. This was something that proved in a way that was tangible, in a way that the Jews could see and relate to, that this was a Gilui Elokus, this was a revelation of godliness in a way that the Jews, in a way that would convince the Jews and inspire them to do teshuvah. Okay. But there is one part of the story which is very, very puzzling. There's one part of the story which, well, I shouldn't say there's one. There's many parts of the story which are very puzzling and difficult to understand, but one which I want to talk about today. As Eliyohu Hanavi stages this whole experience, this whole showdown, the prophets of Avodah Zarah stand on one side and he stands on the other side. And, this whole thing with the oxen, and it's like in the presence of all the Jewish people. As he stages this whole thing, the Torah says that he spoke to the Jews. And he tells them like this. Very famous words. Vayigash Eliyahu el kol ha'am, Malachim Aleph, Perek Yud Ches, Pasuk Chav Aleph. Eliyahu Hanavi approaches all the people. Vayomer, he tells them like this: Ad Mosai atem poischim al shtei haseifim. How long are you going to? It's difficult to translate this. How long are you going to be ambiguous? How long are you not ambiguous? How long are you going to be ambivalent? How long are you going to be, kind of on both sides of this? How long are you going to be unclear? Im Hashem hu ha'alekim l'chu acharav. If Hashem is God, follow him. The im habal, and if it is the Baal, the Avodah Zarah, l'chu acharav, follow it. V'lo onu ha'am oisei davar. And the people don't respond. Eliyahu Hanavi challenges the people, not just for being idol worshippers. Eliyahu Hanavi challenges the people for being unclear, for being on both sides of the fence. He tells them, you have to make a decision. Oder azeh. Either follow Hashem or follow Avodah Zarah. And the people don't respond. They don't say anything to him. And then follows, this whole thing that Eliyahu staged with the two bulls and the Mizbeach Hashem, and the Mizbeach that Eliyahu Hanavi built. And of course, the commentaries all talk about this. How could Eliyahu Hanavi possibly say such a thing? How could Eliyahu Hanavi tell the Jews to make a decision one way or the other, and if Hashem is the truth, follow it, and if Baal, they should follow it? How does a Navi of Hashem even speak that way? How does he allow such words out of his mouth? He should have said to the Jews, how long are you going to be worshiping idols? Time to stop. Time to do tshuva. Time to come back to service of Hashem. He's rebuking them for being unsure, for being two-sided, two-faced, for trying to hold the stick on both sides, both like this and like that. Seems like Eliyahu in his Musar to the Jews is missing the point. All right, it's not good to be unclear. It's not good to have mixed ideas. It's not good to be two-faced, hypocritical. Of course not. But that's the issue here. The issue here is that the Jews are worshiping idols. And they have to stop. And Eliyahu Hanavi is in the position to stop them and inspire them to do teshuvah and bring them back to Hashem. And yet, that's not 100% exactly what he says. He tells them, how long are you going to be Paisech al Shtei Asifim? How long are you going to be on both sides of the fence? Decide, Oder Azeh, either this way or that way. And this is an incredibly puzzling statement. And the people don't answer him. It almost sounds like Eliyahu is actually telling them, you're better off serving Avodah Zarah than being a Pesach al Shtei Hasifim. You're better off being an idol worshiper than being on both sides of the fence. And therefore he told them, I'm going to stop this. It's going to be one way or the other. But why? Why did he present it that way? Why did he insist that being on both sides of the fence is worse than being on the wrong side of the fence? So they were on both sides of the fence. So some of the Jews were both sides. But at least if you're on both sides of the fence, you got one foot on the right side of the fence. No, says Eliyahu. Better put both feet on the wrong side of the fence. Why is that? Why did he say it that way? Okay. To explain this, because there's a very rich idea here. There's a very critically important message that Eliyahu is communicating to the Jewish people. To explain this, I want to introduce it. I want to explain this idea actually from sort of a different, want to come at this sort of from a different angle altogether. But I think it'll shed light on this statement of Eliyohu Hanavi that we read in this week's Haftorah. So here it is. There's a Gomorrah Megillah, which of course, as the Gomorrah introduces its interpretations on the story of Megillah Esther, which we'll read in a few weeks. There's a Gomorrah in the Megillah, a Gomorrah Megillah, which talks about a conversation that took place between Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and his students. The Gemara says that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai's students asked him, what was the grave sin that the Jewish people committed in the times of Purim that was so terrible, that was so disastrous, that they deserved to face this decree of Haman and Achashverosh, that the entire Jewish nation, Minar Vad Zokim, old and young, men and women, Taf and Noshim, should all be Rahman al-Islam, eradicated, wiped out, destroyed, b'yoyim echad on one day. The Gemara says, what was the sin of the Jewish people that was so terrible that they deserved to face this type of a decree? The Gemara asks this question in Masechta Megillah. Now, before we move on, it's important to highlight, it's important to dwell on the gravity of this question. It's important to marinate in the gravity of this question. What's going on here is the Torah says Achashverosh ruled over 127 lands, 127 countries. Now, 127 countries at that time of the story of Purim was basically the entire civilized world. Achashverosh, being the successor of Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, etc., was the leader, was the monarch, was the emperor of the entire civilized world. So when Achashverosh gives his signet ring to Haman and says, here, Haman, you can issue any decree you like. And Haman decrees by the power of Achashverosh that any Jew who's in the domain of Achashverosh is sentenced to death on the 13th day of Adar. There isn't a safe place in the world for a Jew to escape to. Rahman al-Islam. There isn't a spot in the world where a Jew is safe. There's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide, there's no escaping. That means every Jew in the world is sentenced to death by the power of the king and his henchmen, who have the ultimate say and the ultimate rule everywhere in the world. There's nowhere to go. Now, Baruch Hashem, the miracle of Purim in the end, nobody is harmed. But in terms of the danger that the Jews faced, at the time that the decree of Haman was issued, the nature of the danger was such that I believe it's safe to say, there never was such a dangerous moment for the Jewish people in all of history. Now, again, we have to say this with a lot of sensitivity, because in the end, Baruch Hashem, that particular story ends well, and many other stories in Jewish history, Rahman al-Islam, did not end well, where in other cases we had a Holocaust where 6 million Jews, Rahman al-Islam, were massacred. So the danger in the days of Achashverosh and Haman, thank God, doesn't materialize. Nothing actually happened in the end that was dangerous for the Baruch Hashem, the Jews were saved. But in terms of the potential danger that they faced, in terms of the decree that was leveled against them, this was unprecedented in history. Imagine, in other words, imagine if Rahman al-Islam, Hitler, Yimach Shemoy, actually conquered the world as he intended to. Imagine if he had gone about his plan differently. He said, I'm not going to touch the Jews until I conquer the entire world, right? And then he actually did conquer the entire civilized world. And then he said, now I'm going to eradicate the Jews. Imagine what kind of danger that would be. That's what the Jews faced in the days of Achashverosh and Haman. So the Gemara asks, why? Why would Hashem do this to the Jews? Make them go through this? Why would Hashem allow them to suffer, to be in such tremendous fear for their very existence? Why? Now, of course, the question is interesting in its own right because we don't understand why Hashem does what Hashem does, right? Hashem doesn't consult with us. We don't necessarily know why. But here the Gemara asks, Shalu Talmidov, as Reb Shimon Bar Yochai students asked him this question. All right, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, says the Gemara, turned the question back to his students. He offered his students the opportunity. He said, you answer. You tell me why. The students suggested that the reason that the Jews had sinned and that their sin was that they had enjoyed the meal of Achashverosh. The students said perhaps this happened because they enjoyed the meal of Achashverosh. Which is a fascinating answer in its own right, also not for now. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai rejects their answer. He says that only applies to the Jews in Shushan. And this decree was against the Jews in 127 countries, again, which means the whole world. So the students say, okay, we don't know. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai answered. He said the reason why Hashem allowed this decree to befall the Jewish people is because of something that had happened approximately 70 years earlier, when Nebuchadnezzar Harosha destroyed the first Beis Hamikdash and forced the Jews into exile. What happened? Well, said Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, when he forced the Jews into exile and destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, he forced them out of Eretz Yisrael, he gathered them together, and he erected an idol. The Gemara calls it a tselem. Of course, a tselem, in Yiddish, when we say a tselem, we usually mean the symbol of Christianity, lahavdil. But Christianity didn't exist then, so it's obviously not that kind of a tselem. Shtachavul tselem means Nebuchadnezzar erected some type of idol, some type of statue. Some of the commentaries say he put up a statue of himself, which is typical for the way those people acted and thought. And he told the Jewish people to bow down to it. And they did. All except for four. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He told the Jewish people, if you don't bow down to this, Nebuchadnezzar said to the Jews, if you don't bow down to this idol, you will face the death penalty. And in fear, for fear of losing their lives, they bowed down to it. Again, except for Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They, of course, very famously are thrown into the fire, and miraculously Hashem saves them, and they survive the experience. But the Jews don't know this at the time that they're being forced, and so all of them bow down to avodah zarah. Says Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, that was the aveira that the Jews did. Because of that, 70 years later, they faced the decree of Haman and Achashverosh. Parenthetically, the Lubavitcher Rebbe once explained, he said, why did Hashem wait 70 years in between? If they bowed down to avodah zarah 70 years beforehand, why is the decree of Haman and Achashverosh only coming about 70 year later? Why the 70-year gap? He gave an unbelievable explanation. He said, you know why? I'll tell you why. He said, because after the Jews bowed down to the idol of Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah refused. So those four were thrown into the fire, And the rest of the Jews weren't. But those Jews who were thrown into the fire miraculously survived. Hashem saved them. So the Gemara says that after they were saved, the kings, all the other kings of the world, came to the Jews and slapped them across their face. Came to the Jews who bowed down to the idol of Nebuchadnezzar. They slapped them across the face and they said, Yesh lochem elokah kazeh, you have a God like this and you're worshiping idols? And the Jews hung their head in shame. Says the Rebbe, when they hung their heads in shame, that was their tshuva. They did tshuva. Hashem doesn't punish a person if they do tshuva. Tshuva is tshuva. The tshuva was accepted. What happened? 70 years later, when they went to the meal of Achashverosh, when they went to the Suud of Oisei Arosha, and they enjoyed it, Nenu misudasa shel Oisei Arosha, they undid the tshuva that they had done beforehand. Hashem said, I thought you were ashamed of your association with these people. I thought you had hung your head in shame and you had done tshuva. Now you're going to the meal of Achashverosh and you're enjoying it. This undoes the tshuva that you did beforehand. If the tshuva is undone, so the sin comes back. If the sin comes back, it's time to fix. It's time for retribution. It's time to fix this. And so says Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, for this reason, the Jewish people faced the decree of Haman and Achashverosh. It was a gzeira, it was a decree of Hashem because because they had bowed down to the idol of Nebuchadnezzar. Okay. The next two lines, the two lines in the Talmud that follow that are, if I dare say so humbly, are two of the most hair-raising, mind-boggling lines in all of the Gemara. The students heard Reb Shimon Bar Yochai say that the Jews faced this decree because they bowed down to idols, because they bowed down to an idol. And they asked Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, if that's the case, why did Hashem save them? Why did Hashem save the Jews? After all, biblically, from the Torah's perspective, the consequence for Avodah Zorah is the death penalty. So the students of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai asked him, if the Jews are guilty of Avodah Zorah, if they've bowed down to a statue, to an idol, and they've committed one of the three cardinal sins for which there is the death penalty, why are they deserving to be saved? Why is the miracle of Purim that saved the lives of every single Jew, why are they deserving of such a miracle or of being saved b'chlal? If that's the case, the decree of Haman, the Gemara asks this, the decree of Haman should have materialized. And here, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai gave his students a shiur, gave his students an answer, not to be forgotten. He says to his students, you don't understand what I'm saying. You don't understand what's going on here. You don't understand who we're talking about. You don't understand what is a Yid. Listen to me, says Reb Shimon Bar. Listen to me, says Reb Shimon Bar Yochai to his students, and every one of us who are humble students of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. He said, when those Jews stood in town square, in wherever Nebuchadnezzar gathered them together, and they bowed down to his idol in order to save their lives, and they were engaged in what is by all appearances worshiping idols, and what is for all practical purposes Avodah Zorah. Says Reb Shimon Bar Yochai to his students, do you think the Jews actually believed that there was any value or there was any credence or there was anything of worth in the idol that Nebuchadnezzar had set up? Of course not. They knew it was a worthless, empty, pointless piece of rock. So why were they bowing down to it? Because they wanted to save their lives. So they made a show. This was a facade. This was for pretense. This was Hollywood. They created an image. They pretended to be worshiping idols, so that Nebuchadnezzar wouldn't kill them. They never believed that there was anything to it. Of course not. These are Yidden. We're talking about Yidden. Yidden are not worshippers. Yidden are maminim b'nei maminim. Believers, the children of believers. Not one of them gave it even an iota of significance. It was all a show. Says Rab Shimon Bar Yochai to his students, Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo ya'asa ela leponim. So the Eibashter also made a show. You know what the show is called? The decree of Haman. You think, says Achashverosh, that the Jewish people, even for an iota, even for a second in the days of Haman, were actually in danger? You think there was real danger for the Jews? Not for a second. Not for one moment did the Eibashter, did Hashem ever think or plan, or would Hashem have ever allowed one hair from one Jew to shed one drop of Jewish blood in the days of Haman. Never going to happen. It was all a godly show. So Shimon Bar Yochai says, Hashem made a show. He created an image, a mirage, a facade, as if all the lives of all the Jewish people are in danger. There was never really any danger for the Jews. Of course, in the words of the Megillah, Revach v'hatzola yamoid laYehudim, the Jews were going to be saved one way or the other. Hashem works midah keneged midah, says Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Hashem knew that when the Jews bowed down to an idol, they didn't mean to do it. They were just pretending. So Hashem pretended to endanger the lives of all the Jews. Were their lives really in danger? Of course not. Just like the Jews. Did they intend to really worship Avodah Zarah? Of course not. Why did Hashem allow this facade to exist? To teach the Jews, to remind the Jews, to wake them up. To tell them, hey, Jews, there's nobody for us to rely on, only on Hashem. Don't think that you need to pretend to worship the idol of Nebuchadnezzar in order to survive. It doesn't work that way. The Hamans and the Achashveroshs will threaten your life no matter what. Remember that you're a Yid. Learn from Mordechai, who doesn't ever bow down to anyone. Not even for the sake of appearances, not even for the sake of show, nothing. And then you'll be safe. The moment the Jews, faced this decree of Haman and Achashverosh, they woke up and they said, Oy Gewalt. It doesn't help. This show, if we thought we could place Satan, the Nebuchadnezzars of the world, by bowing to idols, if we thought we could put up this fancy show and save ourselves, even the show doesn't work. At some point, the hypocrisy expires. And the truth has to be exposed. And the truth is, as the Torah says about Mordechai, that he refused to bow down. And the people told Haman, you think it's only Mordechai who refused to bow down to you? The truth is, all the people are the nation of Mordechai. And Haman says, we got to wipe them all out. Once the Jews saw that, they realized there was no point, there was no value in this facade. It doesn't get us anywhere. And so they did tshuva for bowing down to the idol of Nebuchadnezzar. The moment they did tshuva, says Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, just like the Jewish people's facade was exposed, they told the truth, they came to truth, they fessed up, to be honest, they said, no, we don't believe in Avodah Zarah. They exposed the truth behind their own facade. The moment the Jews did that, says Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, Hashem exposed the truth behind Hashem's facade. Hashem said, you never intended to serve Avodah Zarah, and I never intended to allow one Jew, Rahman al-Islam, to get hurt. And the miracle of Purim and the Yom Tov of Purim is revealed, which we celebrate till today and for all eternity. Let's go back to Eliyohu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi is talking to Jews. He's forced them all to gather at the bottom of Har Carmel, at the bottom of Mount Carmel. He's facing off with the false prophets. These are idol-worshipping Jews, Rahman al-Islam. They've been spiritually persecuted by Yeravam and Achav. They cannot go to the Beis HaMikdash. It got so bad, by the way, that even at some point, even when the blockades to the Beis HaMikdash were removed, the Jewish people still didn't go to the Beis HaMikdash. By all appearances, these are idol-worshipping Jews. And Eliyahu Hanavi gathers them at the foot of the mountain and tells them, my dear Jews, I know the truth. The truth is that you are Jews. The truth is that you are Maminim B'nai Maminim, believers, the children of believers. But what? Circumstances have forced you. Outside pressures have forced you. Society has had an impact on you. The king of your land has impressed this upon you. The roads have been blocked, both physically and figuratively. And so you find yourselves stuck in a situation where you're surrounded by Avodah Zarah, and it begins to have an impact on you. But the truth is that deep inside you're believers. And the Avodah Zarah that you're committing is just a show. Says Eliyahu Hanavi to the Jews, Ad Mosai atem poischim al shtei asifim, I'm calling your bluff. Stop being on both sides of the fence. I'll challenge you, says Eliyahu Hanavi, decide. Are you going to be loyal to Hashem, or are you going to choose Avodah Zarah? One way or the other. He doesn't tell them, now listen carefully, he doesn't tell them just to stop serving Avodah Zarah. He doesn't tell them just to believe in Hashem, because he knows they already do. He tells them to drop the show, drop the hypocrisy. He tells them hypocrisy is worse than serving idols. Your two-facedness, he says, is worse. Why is it worse? For two reasons. First of all, if a person is an idol worshiper, then when faced with the truth, when their sin is uncovered, the person is able to do teshuvah. The person can say, I must do teshuvah because I've sinned. Whereas if the person is being hypocritical about it, if the person is being two-faced, then they justify it to themselves and they say, yes, it's true, I was practically engaged in a foreign worship, but I never really meant it. Hypocrisy, this type of hypocrisy allows a person to wallow in self-justification and say, no, I'm still okay because I never really sinned, because I never really believed in it. If you cannot absorb the impact of your own imperfections, if you cannot absorb, you cannot truly face what it is that you've done wrong, then you can't heal. If you can't own up to where it is that you've sinned, then you can't really ever do tshuva. And if you can't do tshuva, then you remain stuck. Better to engage in a sin which has a black and white element to it that clearly sheds light on the fact that the person that they're forced to face the internal honesty and say, look, I've strayed from the path, because at least that is a platform to be able to do tshuva, rather than this type of ambivalent self-delusion where the person says, yes, I believe, but I don't, but I'm here, but I'm not there, because then even when faced with the truth, it doesn't inspire the person to do tshuva because the person says, I already know. Right? You know that famous example from the Talmud about the thief who's about to break into someone's house? And as he's about to break in, he davens to Hashem as she says, Hashem, please grant me success. Grant me success that I should be successful in my thievery. And Chassidus says, well, what do you mean? Do you believe in God or not? If you believe in God, why are you stealing? And if you don't believe in God, why are you davening? And the answer is, a bissel yeah, a bissel nicht. A bissel milchig, a bissel fleischig, a bissel... I believe and I need to steal. So you stop this Jew and you say, but so do you believe? Of course I believe. You believe Hashem controls the world? Of course I believe Hashem controls the world. Why are you stealing? Because I need a parnasa. In a way, this type of ganef would be better off. In a way, this type of thief would be better off if he didn't believe. At least if he didn't believe, somebody could sit him down one day and say, hey, ganef, there's the Siddha Gott auf der Welt, there's a God in the world who controls the world and has other means to give you parnasa, and you don't need to steal. And then hopefully the ganef would go, oh, that's right. Have a realization. But this way, if the ganef himself believes, you sit the ganef down and say, there's a God in the world who said, don't steal. The ganef says, I know, I can give the drosha better than you. You telling me stories. This ambivalence doesn't allow inner clarity, creates confusion, and so the person cannot do teshuvah. But there's a part of this which is much, much, much worse. Eliyahu was telling them, he said, you can't be on both sides of the fence. You know why? Because if you're on both sides of the fence, then the truth is that you're not on either side of the fence. The truth is that you're nowhere. If you cannot if you cannot choose one side or the other, then the truth is that you're not on either side. And that's even worse. And that's even worse. At least if you pick a side, at least if you choose one, this shows that you care about something. This shows that you believe in something. This shows that you have a higher moral. But to choose nothing, to be on both sides means you don't care either way. That means you just care about yourself. In a spiritual sense, that's even worse. And I believe in a spiritual sense, this was what Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was really telling his students. He was telling his students, when the Jews bowed down to the idol of Nebuchadnezzar, they didn't believe in it, but they bowed down to it anyways. They were just acting in the interest of self-preservation. They were just trying to save themselves. They said, look, we'll continue believing in Hashem, but we'll bow down to the idol so that Nebuchadnezzar doesn't kill us and so that we can move on with life. And Hashem said, this has to end. Nothing worse than a hypocrite. Nothing worse than a hypocrite. The Gzeira of Haman and the Achashverosh was there to strip away the hypocrisy from the Jews. Don't tell me you believe in one thing and do something else. That's called the Pesach al Shtei Asifim. That's dishonesty. That's dishonesty with yourself. You fool yourself, you're eternally stuck. And so Eliyahu Hanavi gathers the Jews at the foot of Har HaKarmel, hundreds of years before the story of Purim, and gives them essentially the same message. And tells them, look, Jews, I'm not going to allow you to continue deluding yourselves. I'm going to push you against the wall, and I'm going to force you to decide one way or the other. Now, of course, we have to conclude with this. Eliyahu Hanavi is not afraid that the Jews are going to make the wrong choice. Of course not. They can't. They can't make the wrong choice. Because no matter how far a Jew strays, he or she always remains a Jew. So Eliyahu Hanavi, by challenging them, is not afraid that they'll say, either we serve God or we serve Avodah Zarah, off we go. He's not afraid they'll do that. The only way a Jew can engage in this temporarily is if they do so as a facade. Says Eliyahu Hanavi, rip up the facade, stop it. Nothing worse than a hypocrite. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. The truth is that every Jew believes in Hashem. The moment they're forced to do this, the Jewish people fall on their faces and they say, Hashem hu ha'elekim, Hashem hu ha'elekim. The lesson from this, I think it's fairly obvious, but let's articulate it anyways. In life, we face all different types of pressures, and all different types of influences come at us from all sorts of different directions. And sometimes they are very powerful. And sometimes we're tempted to say, you know what? Let me just go along with this. I don't believe it. I don't mean it. I know there's nothing to it, but let me just entertain it so that I don't turn myself into a target. Says the Torah, when it comes to matters of belief, when it comes to core principles of Yiddishkeit, a Jew cannot afford to do that, not for a second. Stand up and tell the truth. I don't believe in Nebuchadnezzar. I don't believe in Haman. I don't believe in Achashverosh. Right? The Gomorrah says in Megillah, the Jews were very upset with Mordechai. They were very upset with him. They said, Mordechai, bow down to Haman. What do you care? Everybody else is bowing down to Haman. Just do it. Placate the man. Give the baby his bottle. And to leave us alone. Why do you have to antagonize him and start up with him and sit in his face and refuse? Mordechai told the Jewish people, you're deluding yourselves. This Haman, this Achashverosh, this antithesis of the Jews is not placeable. You can't negotiate with a terrorist. You can't buy them off. A Yid needs to be a Yid. Stand up and say proud. Mordechai refuses to bow. Mordechai refuses to kneel. Mordechai refuses to be intimidated. And all the Jews who are connected to Mordechai refuse to be intimidated. Haman will issue a decree against us. Says the Gemara, don't worry, there's nothing to the decree. Hashem says it's just a facade. The purpose of the facade, to encourage the Jews to stand up stronger and say we're not afraid. And no, we won't bend. And no, we won't kneel. And no, we won't hypocrisy our way through this. We'll let our inner truth shine, and we'll be honest with ourselves and everybody around us. And we'll tell the world the truth, that as Jews, we are the ones here to teach and to show Hashem hu ha'elekim, Hashem hu ha'elekim. Everybody have a wonderful Shabbos.